All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.
Hey everyone, this is All Rights Reserved, where the law, the people, and the truth all meet at the same table. And today we're going to ask the real question: what is government, or who is government really working for? Is it the people who've been here, or the people who are coming here? Is there a black agenda that we need to build that transcends political parties? What about voter suppression and intimidation and these new laws, the MEGA Act and the SAVE Act, and what the North Carolina State Board of Elections is currently doing or proposing? Because across North Carolina and even in places like Durham, we are seeing growth, development, political shifts, but also a lot of frustration. And we saw that in the primary elections, right? Frustration about housing, frustration about voice, frustration about whether leadership is truly listening. And with elections shaping up conversations around black voter power intensifying, this is not a time to sit back, guys. This is a time, like I love to tell you, to lean in. Let's talk about it. Today, I'm joined by a familiar voice in North Carolina leadership and politics, Mark-Anthony Middleton. He is the former mayor temporo of Durham and served on the Durham City Council representing Ward 2. Beyond Durham, though, he has served as president of the North Carolina League of Municipalities, where he worked with leaders across the state on policy, collaboration, and recovery efforts as it relates to Hurricane Helene. He's also a pastor, a community leader, and someone who has been at the center of conversations around economic equity, including his work on guaranteed income, which received national attention. Today, we're going to talk about leadership, voter power, development, and what it really means to serve the people. Welcome to the show, Mark-Anthony Middleton.
Sister Yolanda, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here. Congratulations on the come up on this great show. I want to say this room looks great as well. Some of your audience may remember, I used to host a show here on Saturdays on the table with Mark-Anthony Middleton. The equipment wasn't this nice, and it wasn't all this poshed out, but I'm glad to see that things are going well for the station, and
it is.
I'm proud to be here with you.
Well, welcome home. Welcome back home.
Welcome
back home. And I know your show was tea, and as the young people say, I don't know, they do this too when they say tea. I don't know. They do something like this. I guess that means good.
We had some great conversations. The room got really lively at times.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's continue that vibe. Let's continue that energy. I'm excited to have you here.
It's good to be here.
But let's just get right into it. We're going to talk today, listeners. Our first segment is going to be about black voters and political power.
Sure.
You've raised concerns on your own, Mark, about efforts to suppress black votes, especially heading into the midterms. What are you seeing right now that has you concerned? And as you talk about this, can you mix a little bit about your background?
Sure.
I know I did a bio, but I think people want to really get to know you, maybe beyond the headlines.
Sure.
But your values.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. And again, it's good to be here. When I was a student at North Carolina A&T State University, undergrad, I was active in leading the anti-apartheid movement during I'm going to date myself, during the 80s. But there was a group of us that also registered students on campus. And we noticed something. When we reached a critical mass of registering several thousand students, they started talking about breaking up our voting district. We had congressional candidates coming onto campus now, looking for us, wanting to take us to lunch, wanting to talk to us, because what they realized is that a voting block of A&T students could literally swing an election in Greensboro. We literally could choose who was going to Congress, who was going to be in City Hall. So that conflagration of power prompted folk to come and start to redistrict and redraw our lines. And I learned then that there is a fear of black, particularly young, concentrated, focused power. So very early on, my antenna were up about how folk respond to folk when they want to exercise the franchise and flex their political vote, their political muscle. Fast forward, we're seeing signals from Washington. We're seeing signals from Raleigh. We have a president that is openly making moves to disenfranchise folk.
Yeah.
I know we'll talk about the Safe Act in a little bit, but when you talk about sending federal agents to seize ballots, and mind you, for an election that's already over and been certified.
The big lie, right? That's what we call it.
The big lie. But the problem is the big lie is not just a historical artifact. It's an alive lie. And we see folk positioning, and we see a Republican Party, a GOP. I'm a Democrat, but I've worked for years in public life across the aisle with Republicans and on bipartisan issues. This is different.
Yeah.
This is not the same GOP that we're used to dealing with. It's not the same party that we're used to dealing with. It has been hijacked. It's been taken over by President Trump, and he rules by fiat. So we see some folk who we know better.
Can you break down fiat for our listeners?
Yeah, directive. He's just giving orders. When you see the Oval Office looks like, Versailles, right? Louis the 14th.
With the fake gold.
The fake gold. And it looks
that
like.
That can't be real gold, right?
Yeah, well, no, it can't be. No, that can't be.
Pissed off as a taxpayer.
Yeah, no. It's looking all French provincial, no disrespect to the French. But, it's like Louis the 14th is going to walk in the office. So he's just issuing directives. The Congress, I think each congressperson makes about $170,000 a year. They're making $170,000 a year just to show up.
Yeah.
And the oversight is a joke. Asserting themselves, their constitutional powers is a joke. Whatever this man wants to do, he essentially does. Thank God for the courts.
Yeah.
For now.
So you're seeing, we connect, I guess everyone, some of us take bits and pieces of the news because it's depressing to just see that Congress lacks power. It's not doing its part under the Constitution to provide a real check and balance on the executive branch of government, because like you're saying, the Republican parties, they're basically in line,
absolutely
right behind the president. And so when we're talking about concerns to suppress black voters, I love what you said about A&T and your history there and the work that you did and realization, wow, we're powerful. They're coming to us. Well, look, fast forward, what has happened? They removed the early voting site there, right?
Absolutely.
And then we saw, young people say, well, we're going to walk. We're going to do what we need to do to exercise our vote. And that was just powerful. Not only that, I believe I saw on TikTok, or maybe it was Instagram or Reel, where one of the young students said he's actually going to run.
Yeah.
This has ignited
That's what they're afraid of.
That's what they're afraid of.
And that's what we actually had conversations about. And listen, I live in Durham now, shout out. That same spirit I see present on the campus of NCCU as well. So shout out to the Eagles. But that was what I lived during my undergrad years. But that we actually talked about running a student even back then for Congress and for mayor. And they were like, yeah, we gotta break this up.
Yeah, we got to break this up. We got to wake up our young folks, and I'm glad that our young folks are woke, and that's the biggest fear when they say the anti-woke agenda, and they're trying to paint wokeness as something negative. It really is a awakening. We're not sleeping anymore.
Yeah.
The lies have been exposed.
Yeah.
We are seeing what's at stake.
Yeah.
And we're seeing civil rights that our ancestors fought for and won back in the 60s. We're seeing how that's being twisted up and dismantled. For example, I read, even on the way here, how the Trump administration is going to sue Harvard University, which we know is an elite, predominantly white institution.
Sure.
But they're suing them for anti-Semitism. And whether or not, the protests were anti-Semitic, how you connect that to the university as a whole. I do believe that they were trying to intervene with some of those protests. But he's suing them based on the theory that Harvard is undoing civil rights legislation. When we see this administration undoing civil rights legislation,
they playing right in our faces. They playing in our faces.
Well, so do you think voter suppression today, some of the things we're talking about now, looks different than it did in the past? We know there's no water hoses, there's no dogs, trying to attack us.
Right.
But how do you think about what happened in the past, what our ancestors had to deal with when they attempt to vote, and how it's shaping up now? Is it just as impactful to suppress our vote?
Well, the blatant images of fire hoses and dogs may not be there. However, I would argue that federal agents with the Director of National Intelligence presence, which is we're going into polling places after an election and seizing ballots. under the color of authority with a court order.
That was in Fulton County, right?
Yeah, Fulton County is pretty dramatic. Things like needing a passport or proving citizenship. It's one thing to bring an ID to vote, but proving citizenship are de facto poll taxes.
Yes.
Where they used to make brothers and sisters figure out how many jelly beans are in the jar, or recite passages of the Constitution.
And grandfather clauses.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we see some of the same playbook dressed up differently. Shout out to Stacey Abrams, Sister Stacey Abrams, the goddess that she is, who did incredible work down in Georgia, and I think showed us a blueprint for grassroots organizing and preparation. I have a passport. I have ID. I have access to my birth certificate, but most Americans do not have a passport. Think about
our grandmothers, our aunties, elderly people in our communities. Like, we even know, because of the history of slavery, the history of sharecropping, the history of discrimination. I have people in my family that may not even really know for sure that was their birthday.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Our family members that were born at home didn't have access to hospitals.
Absolutely.
So now, some of these elderly people, if the SAVE Act, and listeners, we're talking about this national act, these two acts that are moving through Congress called the MEGA Act and the SAVE Act, they're going to add additional barriers to the ability to vote. So even though they're not coming straight out saying you can't vote, the fact that they're putting these procedures in place, this red tape in place, like my husband right now, and I hate to call you out, hon, but I'm helping him get his birth certificate. From the state of Tennessee, and his Social Security card. Lord knows, wives, when you get married, you put on that white dress, you're really putting on a help dress. Just joking. So I'm helping him, he's gonna get me. But I'm really, I'm trying to help him like locate stuff, because we have moved over, a period of time, and he's over, let's say he's over 55, so I gotta help him.
He's a grown man.
He's a grown man. The longer you live, you've moved, we know how hard it is to sometimes find those important documents, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why is because even on the local level, like, we need to get the real ID.
Yeah.
So that's why we're going through that process.
If you want to fly.
If you want to escape America for whatever reason, you need a passport or you need the real ID. And so, all these things are in place.
Absolutely.
And that is scary.
And let's not forget,
the
Civil War ended in 1865. 100 years later, the Voting Rights Bill was passed in 1965. That ain't that long ago.
No, it's not.
It's not that long ago. We're getting ready to celebrate 250 years as a country. More than half of that life, we was into some stuff.
Yeah, we were.
Concerning us. So this really hasn't been that long as nations go. United States, despite her standing on the world stage, is a very, very young.
Yeah, we're a baby.
Republic. Absolutely, compared to Chinese culture or Japanese culture and Persia and so we're very young, but we're very practiced at disenfranchising folks. So
disenfranchising folks, and there's this whole sentiment of who are the worthy citizens, who are the real Americans.
Norwegians.
Yeah, like I don't see the first lady like being harassed by ICE, and we have seen it like on social media how ICE was actually coming up to people just based on race, how ethnicity, and whether or not they had an accent.
Racial profiling. Naked and unashamed.
That the U.S. Supreme Court has said can be a factor. So we're getting it every which way. But let's look at Durham, right? And we're talking about a voting block. I think Durham is a very decisive voting block.
Absolutely.
It's a
ask
very
Roy Cooper.
Voting block. He's ask Roy Cooper. Yeah.
Shout out, Governor.
And I was actually there. I guess it was a leader. It was a convening of like black leaders, and Roy was there. Wes Morgan was there. Were you there?
I wasn't.
Okay,
I was out of town.
I was gonna say you look so familiar.
Yeah.
But because I know we may have been in spaces before together. But
shout out Zach Hawkins.
So what makes this city of Durham so politically powerful right now?
Well, first off, I love the Bull City. I'm originally from Brooklyn.
Bull City.
Bull City. I was born and raised in.
I think it was Ben.
You got to do.
I gotta do this. Okay.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it.
Go ahead.
I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I've lived in Durham for about 30 years now. When for those that are students of Black intellectual life, we know that Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois disagreed on a lot of things. One of the things they agreed upon was that Durham was an it city. They both had remarkable things to say about Durham. I think it was Du Bois who observed that you can literally grow up, go to the dentist, go to the doctor, get a job, go to college, and not leave the Hayti corridor. Everything you need is in blocks, from professional services to educational services to whatever you needed was in that block. So Durham historically has just been a mecca for Black people, and of course one of the Black Wall Streets is Durham, North Carolina. The story of North Carolina Mutual, Black excellence. And I'm from New York. We had Harlem, but Durham is just comparable, if not, if it doesn't surpass, Atlanta and New York in terms of what she represents in terms of Black excellence. So we have always been a place where we have thrived, despite being stony the road we've tried. Right. So any
concerns about that changing, like with the the demographics are changing? Because I'm just going to keep it real for you. Sure. I'm calling everybody out. This ain't my husband. This is way before we got married, sweetie. I used to date this guy. He did not like for me to go to Durham. Like Durham's unsafe. Why are you going to Durham to hang out? With your friends. So that perception, I know Durham's still struggling with that perception. But now when I go downtown Durham, I see, let's keep it real, white folks walking their dogs.
We're in Raleigh right now.
Yes,
If we're so bad, why do I keep running into folk coming to our restaurants, coming to DPAC to see Broadway? That's where they know that's where the flavor is.
That's where the culture is.
Absolutely, coming to see the Bulls. So there's always historically, I think, been a tendency where if it happens in a Black city or place or neighborhood, it's amplified. We know Raleigh got problems.
Raleigh has problems too. And you know what? They want to blame it on the homeless, but they don't want to blame it on development. But we can talk about that a little later too.
Durham's the fourth most educated city in America, one of the highest per capita PhD rates in America. We have the best theater between Atlanta and New York City at DPAC. We constantly make every kind of list: best place for millennials to settle, best place for a startup, one of the best places to retire. So any list you talk about in the country, Durham is constantly making those lists. Now, that's not to say that we don't have our issues. when I was in office, I talked about the pamphlet Durham, the one we show to the world. But less than 2 miles from our city center, we had babies jumping in bathtubs because of gunfire when it wasn't bath time. There was no water in the tub. They're learning how to jump off their bikes to duck and cover like soldiers. So I don't want to sanitize the real issues, but we're the 75th largest city, maybe 73rd now in America. All cities have issues. If you want to, great metropolises have issues, and we have our issues. But the notion that Durham is just unsafe and the numbers just don't bear that out, because a lot of the folk we're talking junk about Durham are secret lovers. They come into our restaurants. They're at DPAC watching Hamilton or whatever. So
they want to just get away and they want to find a culture.
Absolutely.
It's a shame that Raleigh is the capital of North Carolina, and you could barely find Black businesses downtown. Very few and in between Black restaurants. There's a new one that we visited in Roseville. Roseville's growing. Wake Forest is growing. I live in Wake Forest. But let's talk about Rocky Mount and Wide Awake Wilson, because that's our base. That's our base.
Absolutely. Shout out.
So
birthplace of Thelonious Monk. Shout out Rocky Mount.
Yes, Rocky Mount, and Wide Awake Wilson. I'm going to represent for the 252 for Wilson as well. A lot is happening in these areas. Let's start with Wilson real quick. It's a $1 billion stadium that's almost built in downtown Wilson. There was this whole campaign that there's going to be a downtown turnaround in Wilson. And we're seeing this. And they are actually putting a hotel. They're creating what you call the municipal tax district.
Absolutely.
Never thought there would be a municipal tax district in downtown Wilson, which, historically has been Black and brown, predominantly Black, and especially across the railroad track.
Absolutely.
That defining point in a lot of rural small towns, where housing segregation existed. I moved to Wilson when I was 10. I remember folks were saying, well, we're going to buy, my friends, we're going to buy our bikes to the White Wreck. And I'm thinking for years, that was the name of it, the White Wreck. I'm going to the White Wreck. And people were like, it's not the White Wreck. But that's why I grew up thinking it was the White Wreck. So, and hearing like elected officials, you know, who are on city council saying that they recall being ran back across the tracks in places like Wilson. But now we're seeing this growth come up, and now there's this anxiety about how much more further this way are they going to push us out, you know?
Absolutely. Firstly, I'm a immediate past president of the North Carolina League of Municipalities.
Yes.
So I had an opportunity to work with elected officials and community leaders literally across the entire state. I'm so impressed with what's going on in Eastern North Carolina, these so-called sleepy towns that have, you know, this historic Southern charm, but we're lacking in terms of economic vitality and what's going on with renaissances in downtown. And you talked about what's going on in Wilson. Shout out to Rocky Mount. Great place there. Downtown's coming back. What we have to be cautious about is as these economic renaissances occur, that they don't lose their DNA of us's, you know, and making sure that we do things to make sure that we can participate as Black folk, as Black business owners.
The economic opportunity
for us, because you can have economic opportunity and it be vanilla. It can be all one flavor. It's not guaranteed that the stripes will be representative. So there's a lot of Black elected officials, member of NCB, North Carolina Black elected municipal officials, who we have these conversations all the time about how do we make sure legally, because a lot of people think we have more power than we do, I think sometimes. Some things I wish we could just legislate. You can't say, and particularly now, you can't say just for Black folk. You know what's going on in DEI. So we have to be very creative and very dogged in our determination to make sure.
You know, things are subtle. And this is as someone, you know, who does this work as well as you do, around equity and things like that. Like, for example, I'm going to put Raleigh on blast. Like, Raleigh had New Year's Eve celebration downtown. And I don't usually go downtown to watch the acorn drop. I'd rather just be in bed. You know, I'm 53. I'd rather just be in bed, rubbing my ankles together. You know, watching
grown folk.
Yeah, grown folks hanging out on New Year's Eve, right? Well, I went down there because I got these little alpha kids, 15-year-old, like 12-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old. They wanted to hang out there because that's where all the kids their age were going to be. Little subtle things that you can do to make something inclusive is the music. Who's entertaining? If it's just a rock band, we're not gonna think it's for us, right? You know, like for example in Wilson, and I'm hearing this from folks, and I don't know if folks have changed their minds on this, because like people like you and me, we step into the room anywhere, right? We walk into the room, we own the room, we here, we don't care. But I have seen people say that they won't hang out at the Whirly gig when it was first built, which is the economic driver in Wilson. You know, they put that big park there that has got national recognition, but you know they were having events there that seemed to be more white. So even like, so why is that? Like, why didn't like certain folks feel like they could participate? Like, was there a price? If you're talking about, you know, the race wealth gap in America, the race wealth gap locally in various towns. Was it just, you know, was it like maybe because they have formal wear on? I don't know, but. And even in Wake Forest, there's a historically Black community in Wake Forest where my husband and I are hanging out downtown at a lot of events, and I see people like you, me, maybe, you know, based on our socioeconomic statuses, we're in different places. But then people I know that live in this community, they don't even come to these events. So I think it has to be like, not like you could pass a local ordinance that says this is only Black, but you got to kind of like make it inclusive through like other things, like culture, music.
Absolutely. One of the things when you know, when I was at my show wasn't as hot as yours, but one of the things I tried to do with my show is to highlight folk who created spaces of joy, entrepreneurs who with intentionality created spaces for us, by us. Shout out FUBU. Where we could feel totally welcome and our expression and our accents, if you will, were part of the mosaic of a downtown, of an area. And that's hard work sometimes, you know. People are excited when folks start businesses at the beginning, but keeping a client and customer base alive, paying bills, rent, overhead. So my hat's off to folk who create those spaces and who lean in and who do the work of preserving and forwarding Black joy. Particularly in the midst of environments that sometimes seem hostile towards Black joy.
You're right. And like I said, it's the subtle things. It could just be like, we're only playing this type of music. And I think sometimes people do it intentionally. That's my opinion. Yeah. You know, because they're like, oh, we don't want this crowd. We want this crowd to kind of like be here. So sometimes it's subtle stuff. And especially living in Wake Forest, I have seen some of that at certain places. Yeah. But Wake Forest turned blue. Can you believe it? Wake Forest turned blue.
How about that? Stay tuned for some other places too.
Yes, yeah, because the party, I mean, the Democratic Party has been moving in these small towns, Roseville, Wake Forest.
With intentionality.
In the so-called nonpartisan races, even though, you know, some races are nonpartisan, we still know, like...
Absolutely.
We want to know your values. We want to know where you stand on issues. So, but let me ask you this about, you know, some of the things that you have done and what you have tried to do, especially when it comes to the Helene recovery. Mm-hmm. You realize that you had to work across the aisles there, and you realize that primarily in, like, I don't know, some parts of the mountains, it was Trump country, right? Yeah. But these people were suffering. I mean, they lost their homes, right? Tell me a little bit about that, that experience.
When I assumed the presidency of North Carolina League, I had no idea that most of my presidency would be defined by spending time in Western North Carolina working on recovery efforts after this freak hurricane that came so far inland. Yeah, we never saw this type, and climate change is real. Yeah. So the effects of a hurricane that far inland, up in the mountains, where roads were totally washed out. Folk lost their homes. Predominantly white folk. Of course, Black folk lived there too. Yeah. But I found myself in rooms with MAGA, but they had the hats on sometimes. Mm-hmm. And here we were, human beings, talking about how do we get our government to be more responsive, to rebuild our infrastructure. We don't have running water anymore in our homes. Our food's spoiling. Yeah. Our houses are out, and meeting all of this red tape. So my job as the president of North Carolina League of Municipalities is to advocate for all municipalities and towns in the state of North Carolina, to regardless of notwithstanding their partisan affiliation, race, creed. That was my job. Mm-hmm. And forget the titles and forget the formal structure. I will never forget the human connections and some of the stories and some of the breaking bread with folk who we know we were on different sides of the political spectrum. But you're sitting there in the dark with no running water, wearing the same clothes for the last week. Mm-hmm. You know, it didn't matter whether I was a D or R to that person. Mm-hmm. What they needed was results.
They needed help.
They needed help. They had voted for an America First agenda, and it seemed like everybody else was first besides them. So, and go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you. So when you talk, even though we know there was some politics there, we know that Trump came down and tried to blame some folks.
Absolutely.
Because I'm on the board of the North Carolina Rural Center. And so, the North Carolina Rural Center has been involved in some of that. Sure. They have a policy, legislative agenda. Sure. And so, just doing some of the work around recovery in the West as well. Like having this role with the North Carolina League of Municipalities, like how do we keep the pressure on our leadership to recognize that Eastern North Carolina, Wilson and maybe Kinston or Goldsboro, some parts of the East are still like trying to get their homes rebuilt.
Florence.
And that was 2018, and Matthew was 2016, and I was a legal aid attorney there. That's how I know a lot about it. So I was managing the legal aid office in Wilson that served 7 counties out east. So we were doing disaster recovery work, and we just saw how the money was slow coming in, of course. Yeah. And then when it did come in and the NCORE was created, it was just a lot of red tape, and it was just a lot of appeals. And I'm not on the ground as much as I used to be, but I still advocate for this one recovery, this one inclusive recovery to happen. So what can the league do? And I know people be like, well, we don't have money, but beyond like the whole we don't have money, what creative things that could we do to not just make the East a case study for the West, but actually realizing it's an ongoing crisis still?
One, you got to check your partisan affiliation at the door.
Yeah.
The power of the league is that when cities and towns of North Carolina show up, it's a very conservative principle for local control, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't tell our cities how to spend our money or what to do, or give us the money and we'll do it ourselves. And oftentimes that gets parsed along partisan lines, but I found myself, advocating, we want local control. We should be able to determine what we do with our money.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love about local politics is they say there's no Democrat or Republican way to fix a pothole, right?
Mm-hmm.
When 911 calls go out, you send the police or fire or EMS. It doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, which is why I really love local politics.
Yeah.
We got to get it done. At the end of the day, statutorily, we have to pass a balanced budget. We don't get to engage in deficit spending at the municipal level, right? So the league, one of the things I love working with the league is that we were forced to understand that as local elected officials, we have no choice but to get it done.
You have to get it done.
And we have, so therefore, we can't get caught up in arguments about partisan affiliation or the moral kind of issues that important, not to say that they're not important, but we were very nuts and bolts with the league. So, but you're right, the packages and support that the West needed, the East needed even before Hurricane Helene struck. And if we set up structures and cooperative platforms before these type of events occur, it'll be better for everybody. Mm-hmm. I got in my car and drove home to my plumbing working and lights and heat. And I was leaving folk who voted differently for me, looked differently for me, who were living in squalor because of at that point, because of a natural disaster. At that point, it absolutely did not matter, either of our political affiliation.
Human life.
Yeah, and it sounds cliche, but seeing it up close in real life, it's real.
But is that just your heart? To you, it didn't matter, but when a bunch of black folks in Princeville float in, did they see humans, or did they see a bunch of black folks in Princeville floating, not trying to be controversial?
It hit different when it's your stuff floating down the street, right?
When your stuff hit down the street,
But those folk in Princeville, I would venture to say, they would have always welcomed folks to their community.
Yeah, they would have. That's what I'm saying. It could be culture.
Yeah,
like I feel like we
always
are always welcoming.
Yeah.
We are always able. Not saying that I'm not being racist. I have good white friends who are compassionate, but I'm just saying, just in generally speaking, the optics of black people floating, in Princeville versus the optics of
white folk without their homes
folks
in
without their homes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. We live in a country where the big sin, the greatest sin, which was the chattel slavery of African people. Like you were saying, this country is new.
Right.
We're not that far from slavery, and it just seems to be this backlash against the first black president, President Obama. It seemed like after he won the election, Anthony, I was going to Wilson and there was this pickup truck that had acronyms OBAMA, right? Dot between each name, and it spelled out one big ass mistake, America. And I was happy. I was like, "Ooh, heaven has shined. It's light on America. We're now the promise. Our ancestors now have
we
purpose."
Post-racial, right?
Yeah, we're post-racial, and then this pickup truck passes me with this on the back of his tailgate, and I still feel like there's been this backlash because people are still they won't get that man's name out of their mouths. They still blame him for race. They're blaming Obama for racism.
Thanks,
in
Obama.
America, right? When racism existed before President Obama.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I like the fact that on the local level you don't see it as much, and it's kind of like this respite area, this refuge where you can be and you're just getting the work done. But I hope that you will use your voice to keep Eastern North Carolina lifted, right? Because I think people have forgotten about it. Because what happened I will say that the disaster in the West, according to, I guess, the calculation, it was over $1 billion worth of damage. Yeah, I don't recall what it was in the East, but I do know that those communities that were already suffering were hit because of just geography and where you were allowed to live. You were given a cheap land in the flood zone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By design.
By design.
And I know you're engaged in equity work, and that is the whole thrust of when you talk about why we can't let equity go. Because equity, the starting point of equity is a realization of how these things were codified by design.
Yes.
Whether it's redlining, putting folk in low-lying areas as opposed to high, as a local official, where our trash centers go, what neighborhoods we put those in. It's all connected. When you look at you're an attorney. American jurisprudence. It was codified. It was actually part of our.
It became law. And
absolutely.
Race is a social construct, as people said,
absolutely.
for some people to have comfort in life and for money, right? Like slavery. And you're from the North, right? A lot of people say, "Oh, that happened down South," but as you know, it was like, slavery and human beings were like securitized, like loans are. People were getting rich up north off of slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. It built this country.
But if we can dismantle slavery, that gives me hope that we could dismantle a lot of things. So to your point about and what I said in my opening, I know you have ideas about how we can transcend these political parties and build a Black agenda. So can you tell me more about that?
Well, part of I guess the impetus for that is I did a show one time had some Black Republicans on the show, and we spent a lot of time trying to determine who had the best white folk. Like who had the most virtuous white folk, Democrats or Republicans? So they say something like, well, the Democrats it was a party of slavery and Jim Crow. And I said, well, in 1877, when they did that compromise to make Millard Fillmore president, that was white folk dealing with other white folk, Republicans, and ended Reconstruction. So there's enough culpability to go around. So I'm not interested in who has the most virtuous white folk. Democrats and Republicans both have had a history.
They just switched parties, I think.
Exactly. It just switched. So the notion that one party is more inherently virtuous than another, I'm not interested in that, and that doesn't make any sense. Is there such thing as transcendent issues that we as Black folk, because of our shared experience, our shared sojourn in this nation, can agree upon, whether you voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? And I think it's important for us to continue to have those conversations. We know there are Black MAGA folk and Black conservative Republicans and Black Democrats, but we have to have a conversation once these folk are in office to still ask each other, how's it going? Not just kind of this visceral reaction. Oh, I have to keep the party line. I'm a Democrat, but I don't toe the Democratic line all the time. I'm not just kind of knee jerk. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's good for Durham, it's good for Durham. If it's not good for Durham, it's not. So I'm hoping that we can continue to have conversations intra-Black community, whether you're conservative or Republican or Democrat, about a Black agenda and what's good for us as a people. And I think sometimes it's lost because we automatically retreat to these partisan affiliations.
And like you said earlier, the system is doing what's designed to do. Like, I think the two-party system in America is really doing what's designed to do. And even though and me too, I have personal frustrations about how we just give the Democratic Party our vote, right? There's not really that much effort that they have to do. Like, why, when we, especially I think it was 92% Black women, voted against Trump or voted for Harris, why are our issues still, quote unquote, at the back of the bus? When things happen and when things need to be passed, John Lewis, the John Lewis signature voting, that couldn't even get passed. But other communities saw, how certain things were able to become legislative. And I can't recall it right now, but I know the LGBTQAI community was able to get some gains legislatively under the Biden administration. I'm just and we can't get, and Biden did, he really tried to push it, but couldn't get that done. And as a pastor, I saw, and I know you're a pastor. A lot of people don't know that about you, but you're a pastor. What do you?
A lot of people know, they just don't talk about it. The political thing has eclipsed it, but the folk that know, right?
So, are we reading from different Bibles? That's what I'm trying to say. What do you call them? Evangelicals, they feel one way. They're predominantly Republican, and then Black people who are Protestants mostly, and we vote predominantly, other than Wooten, at the Church of God in Christ. Other than him, most of us are, Democrats. So are we reading from a different Bible?
Well, America's a special place. In America, historically, race has always trumped Jesus. Race was much more important than religion, because if it were not the case, once a slave was baptized, they should have been free. Once they professed a belief in Christ, there should have been automatic parity with their slave master. It was not, because race is more important than Jesus in America and has been historically.
You just spoke a word there.
So you can read the same text, and if your filter is attenuated more to race than a spirit without race or gender that speaks to you and speaks truth to you, your outcomes are going to be totally different. So it doesn't surprise me at all, some of the crap and garbage we hear coming out of the evangelical, white church. Not to let the black church
they're calling it white Christian nationalism.
Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
As if
who
Jesus,
this country belongs to.
Well, as if Jesus has a preferred nation.
Yes.
That his kingdom can be distilled down to one particular flag or color. I think it really, I know God has heartburn.
God is not pleased. God is not pleased. He's not
absolutely.
pleased with this.
That is not to say also that the black church does not struggle with our own issues of sexism and patriarchy and homophobia. We'll let folk play in our choirs and play instruments.
We do.
But
we got a lot to deal with too.
Yeah, milk the talent, but still excoriate them from the pulpit. So we've got a lot of work to do. But as a whole, as the old folk used to say, it has landed many a thousand. I mean, for a lot of us, it has been a place of refuge and solace. And from a political point of view, our social justice movement has been centered there. Absolutely. So we critique out of love and from a place of love. So we don't blink our eyes at what we need to critique, but we don't throw it away either, because we know how precious it's been to us.
Yeah. And I think, I always say this, I really feel like, Black Democrats and maybe some black, I haven't seen a black Republican yet. Not a MAGA black Republican that I feel like I can work with. I'm sorry.
I interviewed Mark Robinson on my show.
Oh, God. Speaking of Mark Robinson, I mean, the recent headlines guys are saying that he admitted recently to lying about watching porn to protect Trump. So, you're a black Republican, local, former lieutenant governor, running for governor of this state, and you're thinking about protecting Trump, and you're asking for a seat here in North Carolina. Even though I don't think that's why he lied, but he's saying he lied about watching porn to protect Trump. I mean, but what does that mean?
We sick, boss.
We sick, boss.
Our house on fire.
Mark, we knew you were watching porn anyway, because we saw the evidence, and then the whole thing about CNN suing them, and then right after you lost, you dropped the lawsuit, I guess. Yeah. But so you think we could work with that type of black Republican?
Well, there's some folk who are, there's some things that are bigger than your Republican. If you crazy or got something going on, it don't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. I don't even want to put that on Republicans. There's just some folk who need help.
But he was MAGA. Don't you think he's a black MAGA Republican?
Oh, without question. He was diehard.
So we can agree that we can't work with MAGA Republicans. What do you think?
The problem is, what is MAGA?
Yeah, what do you think? What have you experienced?
MAGA, we were led to believe that it was a set of identifiable principles and values, but turns out MAGA is whatever Trump says it is. If it's America first one day, we're not going to have any foreign wars. He said, I'm not going to attack Iran. We don't want to get engaged in adventurism around the world. We're going to spend the money home. What are we doing now? We're spending almost $1 billion a day in Iran. So MAGA was not to attack Iran, but now we're attacking her. So MAGA basically is whatever comes out of Donald Trump's mouth.
But don't you think there are some people, like when they wear that hat that says "Make America Great Again," like I think they got something in mind. I really think some of them got something in mind, like what it looks like to make America great again.
So
I had a paralegal that went to eat in Goldsboro. When I was at legal aid, she came back and told me that she went in a restaurant and there was an elderly white woman that stated, "I'll be so glad when Trump get elected because you won't be able to eat here anymore."
Wow.
So what are some people thinking about it? I'm not saying everyone thinks that that's what make America great again means, but there are some people, like you said, we think about the whole nationalism thing.
No question.
And whose America this is. And I don't know how I got on this crazy listserv, but KKK be like sending me emails, and I started to block them and spam them, but I decided that I was going to continue to read and see what's going on. I've read things about like how you just determine what's a real American state.
Yeah.
There are people out there talking about what states are real American states.
Absolutely.
And I guess California wouldn't be, and certain like real progressive democratic states wouldn't be real American states.
Absolutely.
So yeah, people are doing some crazy stuff behind closed doors.
Listen, once upon a time, although there may have been racists, it wasn't popular to like be open about it. We have an administration now that is openly and without apology sending people to Capitol Hill to be vetted for positions in the administration that are clear Nazi sympathizers.
Mm-hmm.
That we have people like Nick Fuentes dining at the White House. We have folk in the administration, Stephen Miller, who spouts. I think he memorizes like Reichstag films and speeches, from the Third Reich, spewing this nativistic, racist stuff. And once upon a time, we knew it existed, but you didn't get invited on stage. You didn't get appointed to a position in the cabinet or in the administration. The curtain's open now. We're living in a very different, I think, perilous and dangerous time where folk feel comfortable.
Saying the thing that was not
the quiet part out loud.
And what polite society at one point wouldn't tolerate, but now, and then speaking of Black Republicans like Tim Scott, like I know some friends, some other lawyers who call Tim Scott their friend. I was surprised that Tim Scott stepped out and said, when the meme or the video about the Obamas were depicted as monkeys.
He said it was the most racist thing he's seen from the White House.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, the most. Yeah, this is I've seen some racist stuff that I didn't say anything about before. But you've gone too far now.
This is the most racist stuff I've ever seen.
I stand with Tim Scott. Tim Scott was right.
Yeah, he was right on that.
Speak. Absolutely.
He was right on that. And it makes me wonder, okay, well, maybe this guy ain't just tap dancing and shucking and jiving. I don't know.
Well, the joke was, how bad that meme was? That meme was so bad that Tim Scott was offended.
He was offended. And he hasn't been offended thus far.
That's how bad it was.
He was offended when countries that are predominantly Black were called, asshole countries. And
can't you send us people from Norway?
Yeah,
telling Congress people go back where they came from.
Yeah.
And they Puerto Rican and born in
bringing
Detroit.
Afrikaners over because they claimed they were
white genocide.
Genocide.
That's fine.
I just feel like
too far.
The reckoning. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I just feel like it's not like we're always talking about race, because I do hear it from the other side. They're like, y'all keeping racism alive because y'all keep talking about race. I don't want to keep racism alive. I just want a reckoning and an understanding that it happened. And because it happened, it became systemic, because you can change the laws, but you don't change people's heart.
Absolutely.
You don't change who's in power, who can give you a job opportunity, and who can't.
Absolutely.
And then when we see this rollback on DEI, which was the tool to enforce, employment rights and to enforce the civil rights that prohibited, discrimination in the workplace. You can have a law, but you need an enforcement mechanism, right?
Absolutely.
So in my opinion, as a lawyer, DEI was that enforcement mechanism. And when you see it being attacked, and you see the President of the United States saying we're talking too much about slavery, he's talking about the National Museum, in D.C.
In D.C., right.
The Black
that was
Museum
designed by a Durhamite, by the way.
Oh, go Durham. Let me do it again.
God bless the memory of Phil Freelon, absolute architect that designed it. This whole race thing, America was born in race, right? And for those who consider America an exceptional nation, exceptionalism means that you had to go through something to be exceptional.
Yes.
You want to claim a nation that's exceptional that never had to overcome anything. Mm-hmm. If there is anything exceptional about America, it's that we overcame slavery, or we did away with it. We have not overcome racism. If you take that out the history books, what's so special about us?
Yeah, what's so special about us?
What did we do to become exceptional?
Yeah.
So they want the exceptional moniker, but they don't want, we say in church, you want a testimony with no test.
The testimony with no test.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then there needs to be a reckoning that America wasn't created just from the sweat and tears of great white folks. It's been, first of all, the true Americans were here before, Europeans even got here. And African, people who were enslaved. But I'm just saying, it took all of us, especially, our ancestors. We built this country. We made cotton the economic driver it was that started this country. But I want to ask you, as we land this plane, as I like to say, when we talk about recovery, either whether it's from a natural disaster or just the recovery that we hope our nation will have. I don't know what's going to happen now. Housing rates were going down. Now they're creeping back up. As of yesterday, the interest rate on a mortgage went from 6.11%, which has been a low. Now it's back up to like 6.22% because of the war in Iran and everything else that's going up, gas, housing affordability. Being that this is a people station, I did post some folks like, I'm interviewing, Anthony Mark Middleton today. Do you have a question that you want me to ask him?
Sure.
So I want to be true to that. One of my folks I polled was like, okay, well, we want to know really where he stands on housing affordability, because in the headlines, you've been painted, according to this person, this is their opinion, as Leo's sidekick. But speaking to you now and knowing more about you, I know you're more than someone's sidekick, right? You're a leader.
I've been called a lot of things.
Yeah, so people think you were Leo's sidekick and you didn't care about affordability because you were pro-development. So, here's an opportunity to speak to the people on that.
Yeah, there's a short answer and there's a long answer. First of all, Mayor Williams is a colleague and a friend. We did not agree on everything, but we agreed on a lot of things. I'm not an economist, but I took economics in college, 100 level economics course, and I learned about supply and demand. And what I learned was the less the supply, the greater the demand, and the less supply, it's going to affect prices. So if you have a bunch of people that wants an item and there's less of that item, it's going to be more expensive. If you want to bring down costs, you build more of the item. Basic economics. I've yet, and I've been in Durham politics for a long time, I've never heard an argument or an explanation with, if we engage in a moratorium, de facto or otherwise, and freeze building, how that's going to affect prices. No one has ever explained that to me. Forget the name calling and the emotionalism. I was elected to be a policymaker, so I have to actually make decisions and take a vote. The other thing is, as a city council member, I don't control development. I control annexations, and development is something. In America, if you buy a piece of property, you can do something on it. You can develop it. There are laws that already say what you can build there. So when they come to me, they say, listen, the law says I can build this, but I want to build this. So I need you to change the law.
So you're talking about rezoning.
Rezonings, right.
But then you do have some decision making
on rezonings and annexation. Right. Exactly. That's the point. Development is a phenomena that will occur with or without me. There are some cities in America that have just developed on autopilot. And we see some examples, not really good examples of what it looks like when developers are just left to their own devices. So the touch points I have to shape development are when they come for rezonings and annexations. And the question for me as a decision maker, is the thing they're asking me for to rezone to better than what would go there if we deny it? And oftentimes what will be built by right is not as desirable from a strategic point of view for the city. If you're going to build 15 McMansions at $3 million each, as opposed to an apartment building that can house more folk. I can ask you, are you going to do something about affordable housing? Will the units be affordable? Will you build some sidewalks? Will you build a park? So what we've tried to do, some of us, is exploit those touch points when they come to us. What a lot of folk think is that we can just stop development. That if we say no to you, nothing's going to happen, which is the furthest thing from the truth. When we say no, there are things that still can be built. Every day, companies are building things without talking to the city council, without talking to the mayor, because by right. So I have I championed something called the Marshall Plan. After World War II, the United States poured millions of dollars into rebuilding Europe. So I talked about a Durham Marshall Plan. So when ARPA came along, I advocated for $10 million, which passed, to build up the Fayetteville Street corridor, the Hayti corridor, because I don't have the legal authority to stop people from moving to Durham. So what I wanted to do is build up our infrastructure, build up our economic capacity as a headwind against those folk moving. So when they move to our neighborhoods, we can afford to still stay in our neighborhoods. We can afford to pay our taxes. A lot of folk talk about affordable housing, but we don't talk about how do we put people in a position to afford where they want to live. The economic empowerment piece as well. So, Leo's sidekick, pro-development. What I am is a decision maker that had the realities of market forces and economics. And if they think that, and I'm waiting to see a city council that just solves this problem. What American city has solved it? If you show me who our conversation partner is, what American city, what laws did they pass to stop the dynamics of gentrification? I'm all ears.
Now, gentrification can't be stopped. And I'm a lawyer, but I am a housing justice advocate.
Okay.
During COVID, I got involved with people say I was in good trouble. My friend Grady Buzzy, he's always joked with me like, Yolanda, you and those, I ain't gonna name the people, y'all always causing trouble. Why y'all causing trouble? Well, my thing as a lawyer, a community lawyer, was like, okay, well, people don't really have access to the institution of the law. So, using the law to break down doors, to allow people to actually voice what they have to say. I get it from an economic standpoint, the thing about supply and demand. And I get the side where people are like, we need to build more houses. We need to build more houses. And we don't need to build McMansions in this place because we don't have enough land. Land is becoming scarce, so we need to build up, or we need to build townhomes. That serves more families than a McMansion does. I understand that part, but gentrification can't be stopped once it starts. But it's planned. If you really look into plans and you see how a city wants to develop in the future, different cities call it different things. It could be a vision plan for like 2030, or they cast the vision, and then you're looking at it and you're looking at the ecosystems of buildings and is it going to be better? But we rarely think about the ecosystem of people who are living there. And I'm thinking about Raleigh, and I'm also thinking about Rocky Mount too. Now Rocky Mount has had some trouble. They're going to have to recover again from this deficit that they face. But they did pass an ordinance to create policies that will mitigate the impact of gentrification.
Like what?
There were some of the ideas that we gave them. Some of the ideas that we gave them, like a community land trust, which I know Durham has a community land trust. And we probably don't have. You're gonna have to come back.
Absolutely, we have to do a part two.
Absolutely. So we can talk about this.
Absolutely, because I want to get into this.
Yeah, get into the policies like there.
Guaranteed income we've done in Durham. We use city-owned property to do affordable housing.
Yeah.
You know what I argue? As bad as gentrification is, it's kind of like we look at the crimes that happen, but we don't look at the crimes that didn't happen. There are people that are headline stoppers, right? There are pastors and community workers who take guns and drugs from kids. We never hear those headlines. So as bad as things are, it would be a lot worse if some of the things we were doing, because we can't stop it fully.
Yeah, you can't. You can mitigate it, and you can put safeguards, guardrails in place that will slow it down. Like for example, you hear a lot of people who read books and they're like, and I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about real progressive, mostly white liberal Democrats who are trying to help. They may say things like, these zoning practices are racist. We got to undo them. But they're not thinking deeply about that, because let's say, like a black historic neighborhood around St. Augustine, Shaw, right? So they're saying we got to take the rails off so we can move in. That's going to cause gentrification, where higher wealth people move into an area that's predominantly low wealth, and just by the nature of them being higher wealth, they're going to raise the property values. So why can't we keep some of these guardrails in place, like maybe a neighborhood overlay district? That might sound like, you're preventing people from coming in. No, we're safeguarding the community from an economic shock, which is what it happens when you take all the guardrails off, and it's just like all the development can just come in, like the horses are free, and you have not stabilized it. And I used to be on the.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Put every guardrail that you can think of in place.
Okay.
How do you stop grandma?
You don't stop it. You mitigate it.
Put whatever it is, throw the whole book at it.
Okay.
How do you stop grandma from selling her house?
Education, for one. Like I'm also an estate planning attorney, and I believe in wealth generation. I do wills, I do trusts, I do all of that. So me personally, I think we need to be educated, like you said about.
But I can't pass a law to make her stop selling her house.
You can't make her stop. But like I've heard in some places, I'm not gonna say Durham. I'm gonna say the city starts with the letter R. That people were actually approaching grandma, telling her to sell her house, and grandma is elderly. Have you heard of elder abuse?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my own dad got scammed because he's elderly now, and someone just said, "Oh, I'm calling you to help you with your account." Money got stolen out of his account. These people elderly people are vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And they're trusting, and their guards are not up as much. But if you have a black face and a black realtor going to elderly people living around Shaw and St. Aug, and you're basically telling them they should sell their home, they don't have the education of if you sell your home, where are you going to live, grandma? You don't fit income. Right. You know, they need education.
That's the wealth piece that I'm talking about, the other side of the equation.
Yeah.
Because those decisions are not made in City Hall. If you've got a house that was paid for in the 50s, you're struggling to pay the taxes, it needs repair, and somebody shows up with $200,000 in a briefcase.
And they don't know what $200,000 looks like. Like you and me, we're like $200,000. I know
that's the most money they've seen in their life. At one point, I can just take this money, and not thinking about what the next move is. You may not be able to still afford to live in the city, right? And that's the piece. But City Hall can't contrroll that.
No, City Hall
those conversations have to take place at our kitchen tables, in our church basements, and so I've which is why I propose things like the Marshall Plan. You know, a lot of folk will take a piece of the record and the headline, but I've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff. And
you as a city council person can't do it, but you as an individual citizen who's smart, who's educated, who's
absolutely,
the brain trust of whatever community you happen to, bless by living there. We have brain trust people in our community.
Yeah.
And so I do dedicate a lot of pro bono time as a lawyer, just wanting to have this education. So grandma, don't sell your home. Think about, even to heirs who inherit it. Let's think about what we can do here. Let's think about what we can do here as it relates to housing and how we can prevent it. And I've gone toe to toe. I'm gonna send you my PowerPoint because it's on X.
Do you have a city?
It's on X. Well, I'm talking about transit and gentrification.
Do you have an American city in mind that has
Seattle,
done it?
Well, yeah, I had to do case studies.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the protests or anything like that. But Seattle had what they call a index where they were able to see what was a tipping point and when neighborhoods were about to tip, and they did it based on race data. And I could just send you, because Rocky Mount was one of those cities where we had to do legal research and we had to find, like you say, case studies of what can we do again to mitigate it. We're not anti-development, but it's all about what do you call it? Equitable development.
Is there a city though in your assessment that has successfly mitigated gentrification? Like who's the bellwether? Who's the example you would lift up? We need to do it like them.
Well, the one I can think about right now will be, like I say, Seattle, because they have data, and Wake County has told me they have race data that they wanted to give to cities in Wake County. Yeah. But they were like, we don't want to hear it. Like,
we got the data. I'm talking about the policy.
The policies will be, like, for example, like neighborhood overlay districts. Raleigh removed that, right? Mm-hmm. Remove it for some neighborhoods, but don't remove it for those that are vulnerable. And the data is telling you that these communities are vulnerable to gentrification.
Right.
When you're talking about opportunity zones, right? And I know sometimes we can't determine, because that was like at the governor's level and, federal level. It's like, where are the opportunity zones? Those opportunity zones were framed as to help our communities, but they have displaced the communities that they were so-called created to help, right? And that's what's happening in Wilson. Some of this development is happening because some of these distressed areas, you have to be a distressed area, right? To qualify as an opportunity zone. But then what comes in is some unaffordable luxury apartment that the people who currently live there can't afford.
Right.
And then so the land swells, and that's an economic shock for grandma who owns her home but can't afford the taxes. And then there's a tax foreclosure.
That is the dynamic. And one of the things we did, and I know we time is of the essence. One of the things we did in Durham, we started this tax assistance program. Because
Selma Adams was telling me about that.
Exactly. We can't just open up the government coffers and pay somebody's rent or mortgage, right? So, and the reason why I'm pushing is because a lot of the conversations we engage in, not us, but a lot of these conversations are very abstract and nebulous and aspirational. Yeah. But when you start to drill down and ask, what is the actual nuts and bolts policy that I can vote on that's legally within my lane as a city council member and as a municipality in a capitalist society where landowners and property owners and folk who buy property, I can't come to your house and tell you how to decorate it, no matter how big or so there are limits to us as a government within a capitalistic society. So
I've had to educate grassroots folks about that. I've had to say municipalities, the way the state is, you need an enabling
we're dealing with real estate, absolutely,
to do taxes. The city can't touch taxes, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But there are some cities that have done that at the General Assembly or the legislative level, where
home rule states,
that have done things for long-term legacy residents who are being impacted by high taxes. But it was
we've
not
done
a municipality. Y'all did that, but
with the county.
Some people say it's kicking the can down the road because it wasn't like a loan or something.
Well, no, it's the thing is that, and again, I'm all ears. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me what is the amount of money we can spend, or what is the law we can pass, because whatever we do, there's always some other
inclusionary zoning. Like that's
we can't do that legally.
You say what law we can pass.
Yeah.
So one thing is the General Assembly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Not the municipality. Right. But a lot of people got to realize what municipalities can do and what the legislature can do. But municipalities have legislative agendas too.
Right? Absolutely.
And you can push your legislative agenda.
And we do.
And you can say, well, Durham should not be treated like, I don't know, Rocky Mount.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Durham, we have growth. Like the mayor of Raleigh just said that we're going to have to expand and build more. Yeah. But there's no specifics around building.
Right.
I think we should build, but we should build with intention. We should build it in a way that preserves, and I think Black folks deserve more than art on the walls.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
Chavis Center, like art. Okay, yeah, give us art. Okay, yeah. But the people, it's like saying there once were dinosaurs here. But the dinosaurs are not here anymore. But we can go on and on about this conversation because
and I support inclusionary zoning. But we have a legislature that's not hearing it.
And so municipalities need to band together. I don't know if that's something that the league can do so that this can be in a legislative agenda. Because guess what? Wake Forest has its own special ordinance when it comes to a developer paying them some kind of fee for development. And it's illegal in North Carolina, but Wake Forest was able to get this special ordinance.
Some of those special, and I've seen some of we have now development agreements that we can do with and there was it was a canard, but there was this belief also that Chapel Hill had some special provision for inclusionary zoning. It's not true.
We're going to end the show, but we can still talk afterwards.
We're going to come out. I'm coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll still be here. But I'm
shout out Hip Hop Nation, Choice FM 92.1, the People Station.
As you can see, we as a Black community, there are a lot of issues that are impacting us. So this conversation came right home, guys. We started national, it came right home, and we understand at the end of the day, these are issues that impact us in different ways. We're not a monolith. We're not a monolith when it comes to voting. We're not a monolith with how we approach different issues. But I believe that it's such a time as now that we might need to build some unity. We have to build a coalition around what we agree on, like a consensus. We don't have to agree on everything, but what are the top 3 things that we can agree on? So this conversation right here that we just had is why All Rights Reserved exists, because democracy doesn't just happen at the ballot box. It happens in conversations like this.
Absolutely.
Where we ask hard questions, where we go back and forth in love, where we hold leadership accountable, and where we remind ourselves that power doesn't belong to institutions. It belongs to the people. So whether you agree, disagree, or if you're still trying to figure it out, just stay engaged. And most importantly, stay informed. Be lifelong learners. And most importantly, stay involved. I'm Yolanda Taylor. Thank you so much, Mark-Anthony Middleton.
Great being here. God bless y'all.
And this is All Rights Reserved. Till next time. Bull City.
Bull City, y'all.
All Rights Reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.